Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna say it. I mean, this universe hasn't even started yet, and already we got a movie canceled. So, all right. And okay, I know what some people are gonna say, right? With the DCU, you know, Creature Commandos, and okay, fine, yes, technically that's like the first like initial prologue to the DCU. Obviously, when it comes to like their animation, their live action stuff, for the most part, they're supposed to be kind of canon towards one another, so it does count. But obviously, the biggest number one project that everyone's hoping to succeed is Superman, which comes out in theaters this July. And hopefully that will be like the brand new beginning for the DCU. And of course, there's other projects in the making. We're getting like a DC horror themed film with Clayface, the dynamic duo. There's a lot of things to look forward to. But the film we're going to be talking about today, no. So the movie in question is Sergeant Rock, which is supposed to be like a World War II, like, themed character, pretty much. It's one of those like really weird and bizarre characters, which I'm gonna be honest, I don't know who he is. You probably don't know who he is either. Like I know absolutely nothing about this character, and that just kind of shows, how relevant he is, which I feel bad because maybe there are people that love Sergeant Rock out there. I don't know. My first exposure to the character was literally from McFarlane's DC Multiverse toy line, where he made a Sergeant Rock figure with no guns. Okay, like he literally came with like a knife. That's about it. And my initial reaction was that, is he like a World War II soldier, but he doesn't use guns to fight or something? That was my initial thoughts at first when I saw it, right? But obviously that's clearly not the case. Of course, he uses guns, from time to time. But I mean, that's obvious, right? But I'm not here to talk about McFarlane or the DC Multiverse. That's not what we're here for. We're just here to simply talk about the film and its crazy backstory. So, like I said, it's pretty much been confirmed. I believe, like, I want to say like maybe like a day ago, like 24 hours ago. Let's just say it like that. Yeah, whatever. It's been like it's been confirmed everywhere by IGN, Deadline, Yahoo. Everyone's talking about online, and everybody obviously it's a little bit concerning to an extent because, like I said, everybody is really, really, really hoping that Superman succeeds and that it's not a garbage film, because we all know that the previous universe with the DCEU kind of sucks. Let's be honest here. Look, and I'm gonna say it. I'm a Marvel guy. I'm more of a I love the MCU. I don't care what people say. But look, I'm willing to give the other side a chance too. It's not about competition, at least for me. I enjoy both of these franchises the same way. As long as obviously one's slightly more consistent than the other. I understand that's a bit of a stretch to say because the MCU has had their fair share of like good and bad films, but that goes for any franchise, so I'm not even gonna really go there. But with Sergeant Rock, a lot of people are talking about how maybe it's kind of a blessing in disguise that it was canceled, because apparently this movie's actually been in development for a really long time. And I don't mean like a few years ago. No, apparently it's been in production since the 1980s, which that sounds like a bit of a far stretch. I mean, really though, that's too much, because mind you, Tim Burton's Batman didn't exist until like 1989. That's when the movie came out. So it's like, okay, now mind you, there was never really a set plan for some of those movies to have like a planned universe or sequels and stuff. It just so happened that those movies just kind of got popular. But in the situation with Sergeant Rock, because it's a war film of some type, with maybe some like mystical stuff here and there. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know nothing about the character. And look, I did my research. Of course I looked into the character a little bit more. I still don't get it, but that's just me. Whatever. Not exactly sure how this character would have fit into the DCU, unless it's one of those like he predicted this, he predicted that. Like who knows? I don't know. I really, really don't know. I don't know how I could really provide an answer for that. Honestly, maybe it was a good thing this movie got canceled, because like I said, who the hell is he? Seriously, it's probably not a good idea to start your universe, with a character that is not particularly too powerful. And look, I get it, listen, you're gonna have your fair share of Marvel characters that not a lot of people really know about. Like, I didn't know who Shang-Chi was, but I enjoyed the movie for what it is, and I want to see him come back for more. Especially with the whole situation that we're supposed to get a second Shang-Chi in, and it still hasn't happened yet, so always willing to give some things a chance. But the thing is though, it's probably better that if you start off your universe with the initial characters that everybody knows about. Start off a little safe, and there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, let's start with Superman, start with Batman, Wonder Woman, whatever. Aquaman. If you want to get into the Justice League, that's perfectly fine. Just don't go off the chain like they did in the last universe. Because I remember when Justice League came out, and it was like, aren't they kind of jumping the gun a little bit too quick? Because they pretty much introduced a whole bunch of characters just like that. And okay, fine, I get it. The Avengers movie kind of did that, but not really, because at least Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man, at least they all had their own films first before they made the Avengers, if that makes sense. I'm not here to crap on the DCEU, but what I'm trying to say is that if they want this new universe to succeed, it's pretty much better if you just start off really, really slow before you just kick everything into high gear. You can't just do that, So it's not hard to see why this movie was canceled. And like I said, I believe it was supposed to be in production during summer 2026. I'm not sure, and it's if it hasn't even gone that far. This feels a little bit worse than Blade, because we were supposed to get a Blade movie, but that initially got canceled because literally nobody knew what they wanted to do, writers and all that. Nobody could agree with one another. So I'm very curious to how much more was happening behind the scenes. And one thing I want to end, last couple words I want to say is, apparently the reason why back in the 80s or so, because we were supposed to get a Sergeant Rock film and it didn't happen. Apparently one of the reasons why it didn't happen is because they wanted to use Arnold Schwarzenegger to play as Sergeant Rock, which that actually would have been pretty cool. I would have loved to see that. But the thing is though, Commando, they kind of do seem similar in a way, although I don't know too much about Commando. I've seen the movie maybe a few times, but I haven't seen it enough to remember every single thing. Except for that one scene where he was driving a car, it's all destroyed with bullet wounds, and then in the next shot, it's completely fine. That's the one thing I remember from the film. So I guess, I don't know, they didn't want to make Sergeant Rock and then it's too similar to that one. I don't know. Everything, it's pretty bleak for the most part, so... They failed back then, and then they failed again. They failed back then because, well, unfortunately, there was already a movie cooking with this type of, with this type of idea. It failed now because they wanted to kind of fit it into the DCU, and yes, admittedly, it's meant to be more of a sort of experimental type thing. I mean, for crying out loud, it's a giant kaiju in Superman. Come on. And obviously, it's really better if they don't start off with a random character like that, because if I didn't know who he was and they're making a movie about him this early, probably not a good idea. You're risking it at that point, and you don't want to do that. But those are just my thoughts, so I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree? Are you okay with the movie being canceled? Or are you not okay with it? What DC films are you looking forward to? Come on, why not? And I understand I've been talking way too much about DC lately, but look, like I said, I like Marvel too. I like a lot of things. So of course we're gonna be talking about a whole bunch of different topics here and there. Honestly, I didn't really plan this off too well. I was genuinely surprised though when I heard the news. So I wanted to give my thoughts because it's pretty critical, especially for this universe has to succeed at all times. Also, before I end the video, if you're wondering what the hell that black thing is, that's an xenomorph. In case you're... yeah. Anyway, that's about it. So thank you guys for watching as always. Leave a like, subscribe, and that's about it.